morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting of the TRPA Governing Board to order. It is Wednesday, April 23rd, and it is 9:42 a.m. The first item on the agenda is a roll call to determine quorum. Can you please call the roll?
Ms. Alding, Mr. Aguilar,
Here.
Mr. Bass, Ms. Conrad Seda, Ms. Faustinos,
Here.
Ms. Gustafson,
Here.
Ms. Hayes,
Here.
Ms. Hill,
Here.
Mr. Henigman,
Here.
Mr. Keycapper,
Here.
Ms. Lane,
Here.
Ms. Loomer, Mr. Rice,
Here.
Mr. Settlemeyer,
Here.
Ms. Williamson.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. A few housekeeping rules. This meeting is under trpa.gov under the calendar header. Click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for April 23rd, 2025. To remote board members, please either raise your hand on Zoom or wave your hand to get my attention. And please know using the sidebar to have conversations in the chat box. And let's move on then to agenda item 2, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. There are flags behind us. Okay, everyone could please stand.
Which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, thank you. Next on our agenda is agenda item 3, which is the time for public comment. Any member of the public wishing to address the governing board on any agenda item, this is the time for comments. This includes items on the consent calendar, and this is the time for it. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and we'll hear public comment for 45 minutes if need be. This comment period is reserved for any item on the agenda. Just reminding again, comments on other matters not agendized can be heard at the end of the comment period after the meeting, after we've gone through the agenda items. So if we could please have any members of the public wishing to make comment now in person, if you could come up to the microphone, please. Thank you. And if you could turn on the microphone. It should be the talk button in the middle. Yeah. Thank you. And please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is John Ippolito. I'm a local resident. I don't know, coming up on 30 years. I've been a real estate broker here for about 27 years, I believe. And I wanted to make a comment on something Secretary of State Aguilar said when you guys approved the regional plan like a year or so ago. And one of the things I heard him say was, you guys need to start listening to the residents of Lake Tahoe when he voted no against the updated regional plan. And thank you. He was the only one who was reasonable and who listened and who voted against that plan. So thank you, sir. We appreciate that. You're still not listening. You know, transportation, we don't need a whole bunch of more people coming to Tahoe in the summertime when you can't evacuate us now in the event of a fire. And it's very frustrating. I know there's developers and people who are married to developers and engineers and people who are profiting from bringing new people into Tahoe. And it's not okay. First thing we need to work on is keeping the lake clean and getting us out of here in the event of a fire. And I feel, being a realtor for 27 years, the TRPA just used to be an annoyance when someone wanted to add a deck or do something at their house. But the guy at the end of Lakeshore can take out 300 tons of dirt or whatever he took out because he's got a lot of money. But my clients who want to add a deck onto their little house have trouble getting it done. That's what TRPA used to be. And it's almost better that you guys were doing that. Now that you're into the city planning, you're going to ruin this place. And we've had all these big fires, and that should be a wake-up call to all of you. Now there's one going in New Jersey. I used to live there. There's not supposed to be fires in New Jersey. We have more fuel here than any of these big fires, the Palisades fire, the Lahaina fire, the New Jersey fire now. There's much more fuel here than there is in any of those places. And when we get those afternoon winds, you can't get us out of here. My friend's plan is to get on his bicycle to get out of here when there's a fire. You guys need to start listening to the residents of Lake Tahoe. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gavin, when you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you. Yeah, Gavin Feiger, Policy Director at the League to Save Lake Tahoe. I'd like to comment on two of the governing board items, the regional transportation plan and the enforcement presentation. Just keeping it high level with the new comment period here. Really appreciate, so on the RTP, really appreciate and support the transportation planning staff. He's got a fantastic team there, getting better year after year. And for this plan, the focus on transit is definitely appropriate. It's one of our biggest unmet needs. It's a little unfortunate to see that, the funding projections show that we're not really going to see much of an increase in transit in the near or even kind of long term. But at least it's realistic, and we still have hope. We're optimistic. The Emerald Bay pilot project coming up this summer is one example that has been in the plans. A big thanks to Supervisor Lane, Devin Middlebrook with TRPA, and the Tahoe Fund, who's also really heavily supporting this. But we got the league. We advocate to get this project into the regional transportation plan in 2016, 2017. I've been kind of picking away at it ever since, and there's finally momentum to have it happen. So the regional transportation plan does call for more of these recreation services. So I really do think there is going to be a path forward. I'm really excited about it. One note on the regional transportation plan is the safety improvements. It'd be great if we could add those safety improvements to Emerald Bay also, because Caltrans will be doing a road safety audit, which could lead to permanent safety improvements within the timeframe of the RTP. So I think it would be appropriate to add that into the map in the plan. And then transitioning to parking. There's also some good emphasis on parking in the regional transportation plan. And that's something the league really is going to lean into over the next 5 years, is this park once philosophy. So, people are going to drive to Tahoe, kind of accepting that for the near term, even though it's a hard pill to swallow. But while they're here, they get here and they park once, and maybe by corridor, North Shore, South Shore, West Shore, starting with that. Emerald Bay really supports that. It has and it encapsulates a lot of our efforts at the league over the years, and I think a lot of TRPA efforts too. So it's a lot of good complementary things in the regional transportation plan to move forward with. And we as a league will continue our focus on pilot projects and proof of concept, taking the risk around microtransit, bike share, scooters, still defending those to this day, trying to keep as many options, bring in and keep as many options as possible. The last thing in the regional transportation plan is Commute Tahoe. We really want to see that more than just voluntary, but enforced. We could get into more detail, but we've been at this and we've been part of it, an active participant since the 90s, and voluntary isn't going to cut it. For enforcement, we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but we all know that the goals, that are in plans and projects when they're approved are not realized until the project is finished, and going forward, everything's complied with and enforced. So really looking forward to the presentation and seeing how you're doing that. And we'd love to help share that story. So that's it for this comment period. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. Anyone else in the room wishing to make comment at this time? Okay, let's go online then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 2 hands raised.
Okay.
The first hand up is Alan Miller. Alan, please unmute to make your comment.
Hi, Al Miller, civil and environmental engineer. I submitted written comments for the record of today's meeting, lodging my concerns with TRPA inactions with regard to microplastics, item 4 on the local government committee, and another expanding my petition to you from last month against your illegal and deficient environmental review procedures and microplastics. Neither of the comment letters were published online for the meeting as legally required. A third comment letter was posted under the wrong item number. So my first question then is whether this meeting is being held illegally. Those things I've said to now is really a point of order and shouldn't count against my time limit here to speak. My comments are that I petitioned TRPA to address illegal practices being followed under TRPA code and rules of procedure that trespass and usurp compact requirements. Among these are requirements to prepare an environmental problem assessment pursuant to your code for microplastics, something TRPA has failed to do in the over 5 years the presence of microplastics has been known about in Lake Tahoe. You stand in violation of TRPA code, a failure for which TRPA may be liable. Second, my comments extended my petition against compact violations to the illegal memorandum of understanding provisions delegating TRPA permitting authority to City of South Lake Tahoe, including line staff. TRPA was tasked with preparing permits and environmental reviews under the compact. Instead, it adopted illegal and deficient procedures akin to the California Environmental Quality Act, a lesser standard than was required by Congress, and then further pursued illegal delegations of authority to the city under the current Memorandum of Understanding. So I petitioned TRPA to cease and desist from assuming others can do your work. Stop it. And get busy with the environmental assessment that you've put off for over 5 years now, sitting on your thumbs while your microplastic studies mount into the hundreds of thousands, ignoring the most obvious things, which are the docks and piers, which contain the greatest mass of plastics in contact or over Lake Tahoe. And to ignore these things, it didn't cost me a damn thing to figure that out. And for you to sit there and ignore it while basically robbing the public till to pursue this problem in some specious scientific manner, as I wrote in my comments, which were not posted, it just boggles the mind. You do all these things that you shouldn't be doing, you don't follow the law, and then you don't do the things you're supposed to be doing. And it's no wonder that the lake is being slowly and inevitably destroyed, including by toxic contamination with microplastics. Thank you.
The next hand raised is Niobe Burden. Niobe, please unmute to make your comment.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Governing Board. My name is Niobe Burden, a longtime Lake Tahoe resident as well as conservation photographer. Recently returned after a decade overseas, coming home has been both a joy and a shock. I've witnessed troubling changes, early season algae blooms, microplastics along the shoreline, oil residue on rocks, clear signs of a lake and a community under growing pressure. As you consider Connections 2050 regional transportation plan, I urge you to treat it not just as a roadmap of mobility, but as cornerstone of broader strategy to address Tahoe's true carrying capacity. We see year-round visitation now, driven by climate mitigation, regional growth, year-round recreation, yet there is still no up-to-date carrying capacity study to guide policies on infrastructure, tourism, wildfire evacuation, or water quality. We can't sustainably plan transportation without understanding how many people and how much activity this basin can support. TRPA's recent environmental threshold evaluation is a step, but it also revealed a transparency gap. The public and TRPA committees would benefit from clear visual tools, a pie chart separating scientifically measured indicators from those based on management implementation or policy. A second chart categorizing measured indicators into improving, declining, and stable with clearly marked gaps in data. This would help restore public trust, avoid greenwashing, and ground future decisions in data, not just intentions. Looking ahead to your retreat tomorrow, I strongly recommend launching a comprehensive carrying capacity study, not as a replacement for the 2012 EIS, but as a long overdue update that reflects today's conditions: climate change, regional growth, wildfire risk, and infrastructure strain. This study could tie together the great work already happening in your communities and on your committees, and provide the foundation for meaningful new tools. For example, time-allotted reservation systems like those now being used in national parks may be necessary to manage visitor flow during peak periods, but we need real data to justify the design these systems effectively. A modern CCS would also support more realistic population data for the fire safety planning, smarter tourism policies, stronger applications for federal and state funding, and at long last, a measurable indicator for the recreation threshold. In closing, returning from has reinforced my belief that Lake Tahoe's future must be shaped by science, transparency, and community input. A CCS offers a proactive path to ensure the lake we love can continue to be lived in, visited, and protected. Thank you for your time and leadership. I do hope that you listen to the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more hand raised. Melissa Soderston, please unmute to make your comment.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa Soderston, South Lake Tahoe. I just like to echo a lot of the comments that were made. We really need a proper environmental assessment, a basin population assessment. Like, we are just not doing the right things. You guys are focused completely in the wrong directions. We need a wildfire evacuation plan. We need to focus on our built environment. We need to focus on public transportation. None of these things are prioritized in any way. We are still focused on building new parking lots and logging the forest, which has been proven to be detrimental to the forest. We have been speaking about this for years now, begging you guys to do a proper environmental assessment, proper environmental impact reports, proper wildfire evacuation plans. Instead, we get greenwashed nonsense and public-private partnerships, which just prioritize whatever the Forest Service is telling you to do. This is very disappointing. And if you go through with either this transportation plan or the regional plan, it is completely spitting in the face of what the community has been begging of you for the last several years. It's really just egregious. You have these millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that should be focused on improving our built environment. All of the sediment from this logging is running into the lake. All of the sediment from the roads running into the lake. We do not have proper storm drains. We don't have proper water infrastructure in the case of a fire. These are not wildfires any longer. They are urban conflagrations. These fires spread from structure to structure, not from the forest into our communities. Embers are traveling miles. Nothing that you are doing is protecting our communities or the lake's clarity. Please, please, please focus on science. Hire a scientist. Stop listening to old science from 2012. Stop listening to what the Forest Service is telling you. Do your own science. Do your job. Protect the environmental quality in Lake Tahoe. Thank you.
Madam Chair, there are no more hands raised to comment.
Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 4, which is approval of the agenda. Director Reagan, are there any changes?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll deem the agenda approved as posted for the record. Agenda item 5 is approval of minutes. You have a draft set of minutes from March 26 on page 31 of your packet. Does anyone wish to make a change to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'm going to abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Any, motion still passes. Thank you. Agenda item 6 is the TRPA consent calendar. There is one item on consent which was not reviewed by any governing board committee. Item 1 is the APC membership reappointments for the Tahoe Basin Fire Chief's primary representative, Chief Chad Stephen, or Stefan, I'm sorry if I said that wrong. First, which one, Stephen? Stephen, all right. First alternate is Chief Scott Lindgren, and secondary alternate is Chief Jim Drennan. Any board members have questions on consent calendar item 1? All right, seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion to approve?
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Alding? Mr. Bass? Mr. Aguilar?
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos?
Yes.
Mr. Keykeeper?
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson?
Yes.
Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Hennigan?
Yes.
Mr. Settlemeyer?
Yes.
Ms. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. Loomer? Ms. Williamson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next item, we need a motion to adjourn as the TRPA and convene as the TMPO. Do I have a motion to adjourn and convene?
Motion to adjourn?
And convene? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that brings us to agenda item 7, the TMPO consent calendar. There is one item on consent, which was reviewed by the Transportation Committee. Alexis, can we have a report from the Transportation Committee on the consent item?
Yes, today we had a presentation on the work plan and the budgeting that staff plans to do over the next year. Had a great discussion on improvements to be made on Highway 28 and heard from some public commenters that we hope to clarify some of the things that we're working on as part of the presentation that we'll hear from Michelle.
Cool, thank you. Any questions? Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the TMPO consent calendar.
So moved.
Any further discussion? Maria, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Aldine, Mr. Bass, Mr. Aguilar,
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos,
Yes.
Mr. Keycapper,
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson,
Yes.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Mr. Henigman,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemyre,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. Loomer, Ms. Williamson.
Yes,
Madam Chair, motion passes.
thank you. And I don't have this in my notes. Do we reconvene as TRPA now, but our next item is transportation? We stay in TMPO?
Yeah.
We stay in TMPO.
Stay as
Right.
TMPO.
Great, thank you. So we'll move on then to agenda item 8, public hearings, which is Connections 2050, the draft regional transportation plan. Director Reagan and Michelle Glickert, I think, are going to introduce and talk us through this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. Just wanted to thank the board for the engagement on the issue of transportation over the last many years at the agency, and we've been vetting the policy information contained in the draft through the Transportation Committee. And I want to thank Member Hill for chairing that committee and all the briefings that have been done so that we can be efficient as we move the draft forward into the public space and take comment and work with the community so that we can then bring that back to you for your consideration in July. And a lot of work has gone into this draft, and I want to acknowledge the team that's before you and many others that you don't see. The team has worked very hard to engage the community in this and to really reflect their wishes in this document. So I want to turn it over to Michelle Glickert, who will present.
Thank you, Executive. Oh boy, this is not a good start. Executive Reagan. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Michelle Glickert, the Transportation Planning Program Manager. Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, as Julie said, I'm excited to share with you today Connections 2050. And there are a whole host of people in this room from the agency who helped work on this document. It is a focused update of the Regional Transportation Plan. Next slide. So let's get started. Connections 2050 is more than just our transportation. Next slide, please. Connections 2050 is more than just our transportation vision for the region. Next slide. There we go. Okay. It also satisfies our 3 distinct transportation planning authorities: the TRPA compact, our role as the MPO, and our role as the Regional Transportation Agency in California. So it's the transportation element of our regional plan, but it also has to be updated every 4 to 5 years. We're required to look out at least 20 and forecast a vision for the region. That's for project implementation and funding, and actually build a funding forecast for those projects. So let's begin. Next slide. So we start each plan update with public outreach, and that's whether that's through our various planning documents that we bring forward to this group. That's like the active transportation plan we brought forward last year, with the help of the committee, our Vision Zero planning. We really never stop public outreach on that regional transportation plan. Those documents all roll up into the larger plan. We reached over 6,000 participants in various surveys, over 10,000 proactive outreach. Those are things like going to standing committee meetings, going out in the community, going to those public events, tabling at Earth Day. We did solicit direct feedback on getting around Tahoe from the public. That's shown here on the left-hand part of your screen. Those are barriers to transportation that were identified, and that helped us then inform and refine the projects, the transit services that we need, and the programs in the plan. So the top responses are summarized here, one being walkability. While we've seen more improvements in walkability, we still have many networks with incomplete connections, sidewalks that are lacking, sidewalks that end. So those, we're also looking at cheaper and more convenient ways of getting around to create more travel options that don't require vehicles. So that's a little bit of the summary of some of that public feedback we heard. And of course, concerns were expressed, as you've heard today as well, about the effectiveness of the transportation system during emergencies too. Next slide. So we begin our planning process. Like I said, it's sort of an ongoing, by looking back at how we're doing and linking data and science to decision-making. That helps us then identify what our future needs are. So the Transportation Performance Technical Advisory Committee, that was a committee the board created during the last RTP approval in 21. They convened, they reviewed data, and they have provided some key conclusions after examining the state of the transportation system. Those include population data, the various fluctuations you see, that's the image on the bottom of the screen. This is also information in the executive summary, as well as the full plan. And I'm going to be pointing that out a little bit as we go along, because I think some of the public comments can be addressed there. So this is a good screenshot here of that fluctuation and population that we see. Those peaks there, no surprise, are our holidays, right? Our ski season holidays in the winter, and of course, summer, 4th of July being the top there, and Labor Day coming in at second. So the idea is when we are doing our analysis and thinking about the fluctuations, that's our resident travel, our daytime population growth from visitors. We need a flexible system, transportation system, to accommodate all of that. So basically, the plan looks at the growth outside of the region as well and considers this in all of the planning we do. In the executive summary and in the report, you'll see we have details and an assumption of about 0.25% in growth. So over the life of the plan, the 2050 plan, that's about 7% growth. Now, a lot of folks in the past have said this in the last RTP as well. While the region's, hustling, bustling outside of us, it doesn't always equate to, equal amount of growth in our region. So we do look at the details of that. There's also an appendices that refers to all of the data and the analysis and a bit on our forecast and our modeling. So that technical advisory committee had a big job. They looked at all of those things and they identified a large need for expanding transit. Regionally, that means connecting within north and south connections that aren't there, and more connections to the outside partners like Sacramento and Reno and Carson and even our Bay Area. So those recreation corridors, we've talked a little bit and heard a little bit about that. We look at those, and they were also looking at ways to better manage recreation travel. So one of the things we have to remember is we have state highways and we have a U.S. highway. So it's important that those are factors. We don't have privately owned, recreation access. Those are state highways that need to be open, and a U.S. highway that is really important for travel. So it makes our job a little challenging, but it's nothing we can't, accomplish. One of the things that the Technical Advisory Committee also looked at was the need for, those local services. So yes, we need to increase our transit regionally and north to south, but it's the day-to-day services we too are lacking. Those services need to run later to help those employees get to and from work. We also need more flexible funding for these services. That Technical Advisory Committee really provided a lot of good recommendations that are now folded into the plan, which I'll be getting to in just a second. So technology, we're going to talk about our T's, and that is one of them, really gathering better data. We continue to find better sources, not always complete, but that is something that's, continually been helping us develop this plan. And that data has better identified that variability in the population that we see now on the screen and has helped us a little bit in the planning of the regional transportation plan. So lastly, the tech identified an opportunity given to TRPA. It's not typical to all MPOs. TRPA has a code of ordinances that implement the goals and policies of the regional plan. So the draft regional transportation plan folds into that regional plan, which means we can also update analysis on two code, geez, I gotta slow it down and breathe. 2 code ordinances updates, one of which is about employer programs. We do actually have 2 TMAs. We have one on the North Shore and the South Shore, and they are the folks who work on a monthly basis with our large employers. And those are our ski operators, right? Those are some of our large employers, the hospital, all of those recreation providers. So the TMAs we often see as an extension of staff working and discussing like how to get those employees to work and how better to manage that recreation, those recreation peaks that you see there. So the other code change that we are proposing is about how we can construct more sidewalks. Those are going to help us with those connections that we see, those gaps and those connections. So that's going to support the active transportation plan goal that we have, as well as the overall plan. But if you remember in Tahoe, we never have a project that does just one thing. They're always multi-benefit. And in Tahoe, we're always balancing the environment with our mobility, and transportation can be a part of that solution and help with that. So with sidewalks come water quality improvements. With the employers and working with them, we have reductions in VMT, right, which help then our air quality. Everything is tied together. So trends at the regional level of growth don't always translate, as I said, but we do consider and we make adjustments to our day use. That's the North Shore. We have seen some increases, and some of this data is in the Transportation Performance Report, which is an appendices to this plan. So that shows some of the increases that the North Shore is feeling, where we have some of that growth on our roadways. And in the South Shore, however, we saw some decreases. And that's all about regional planning and that flexibility in the system that we need. Next slide. So those recommendations and all of that analysis lead us into updating our goals, which many of you from that Transportation Committee, along with members of the public, provided feedback on. And those are shown here. The goals are associated the goals and associated policies have not changed that dramatically over the years, but each time we update the plan, we re-review them, we provide clarifications, we update. In 2017, the plan, we did not have mobility devices like e-scooters. Wasn't in the plan whatsoever. At that time, we were lucky to have a little bit of bike share with about 6 gears running around town on the South Shore. So the idea is that it's an opportunity for us to continually update our plan. Now we have e-bikes. Those were few and far back then. Now those rentals are everywhere, and we now have to accommodate all of these great devices. But they come, it's not always easy. So now we have microtransit, right? In our last plan, that was a glimmer, kind of getting started on the North Shore. And now they've integrated microtransit services with their fixed route. And they're even looking at electrification of these services. And that's all, again, to support those environmental goals we have. So this time around, we've updated the goals, responding to stakeholders and our public. Emergency preparedness and resilience planning are top of mind, more than ever, woven into those policies and project planning and implementation to achieve our full vision, truly connected system. from the north to south, regionally. Connections 2050 is a plan that has all of that data, that public input, those revised policies to help create a transportation system that's interconnected, interregional, sustainably balancing the environment with our mobility needs. Next slide. This is a good one. The plan is structured, identifying a set of strategies to achieve the full vision, and here are 4 T's. So I'm going to walk you through those. So transit, starting with that, we do have successes to celebrate with ridership levels coming back to those pre-COVID times, due largely to microtransit. Now, as I mentioned, it wasn't, that heavily, it was projected to be, in the future, and now we have it on the ground and integrated. So we also have some recent successes with van pool programs, which, are really important to get those employees who no longer are living in the basin, outside of the basin. All of that has been growing on the North Shore and now on the South Shore as well. So the plan continues implementing that transit vision with microtransit, those existing services. It's a great first mile, last mile option. The smaller vans can help us in our challenging environments, whether that's the hills in the winter, snow. It's far more mobile. So expansion of services are in that full vision. Transit more than once an hour into the later evening hours, right? We heard about that from the public and the need for that. Mobility hubs supporting regional and local connections to and from recreation destinations in our town centers. Next slide. So now trails. Those include paths, bike lanes, sidewalks, creating a system where you can walk, bike, or roll. We've talked a little bit about new mobility devices. We never know what's going to be next in the next plan. Maybe we'll be all hovering on our boards, running around. The idea, though, is that we need to be predicting and have a flexible system for what's to come. The plan proposes to actually separate a little bit those slower moving devices. I didn't get to mention our lovely animals that have carried us through here in the beginning slide, but we have Lola here rolling along for what we need to be doing in the future is thinking about what we can do in our roadways for those faster moving mobility devices, whether those are e-bikes or scooters. And we want to add a little bit of separation so everyone's comfortable and safe. So adding in-street lanes for those devices that can move a little bit faster is part of the plan with those buffers. We continue to make progress on some of these concepts, creating more paths like the Dennis Machida Trail from the college on the South Shore to the Sierra Tahoe neighborhood. But the plan includes extension of that project and going further, along with up here on the North Shore, Tahoe City Lakeside Trail, closing the missing link in the North Tahoe Regional Trail. Next slide. So technology, we have made some advancements since the last plan. We have more reliable transit service that can be found on our phones. We actually know when those buses are coming and can see them. While both Caltrans and NDOT have live camera feeds from various locations across the basin, so you don't have to rely on a color-coded map. You can actually see the weather conditions. The Tahoe Transportation District is working closely with Caltrans and NDOT to get better traffic counts. Again, improving our data, using their own systems, right? Using Caltrans and NDOT systems. The second phase of this work is in the plan where we expect to see an expansion of those counts. So those will be real-time counts on a regular basis. Capitalizing on emerging technology like that TTD project, that is what we have in our plan today, but we still need and want to understand how many travelers live, how many folks actually live outside the basin and commute in. That is what we need to understand for a true vision to complete that vision of the plan about disseminating travel options, right? People want to know where they can go, how to safely get there. Those roadway conditions are important. Just trying to get around once they are here. Ezra the Eagle here, having bus information without a smartphone, that's ideal. To finding the closest place where you can charge a vehicle. Those are the sorts of things that are in the plan. It's that information and making that available to the public and sharing and tracking that for emergency management as well. Like the systems that we want to improve don't just help our daily traveler. So this information is important for those regional partners and the public, but overall improving our communication system is a part of this next plan. Next slide. So that brings us to the final T and a little sidekick corridors here. Very important. We're prioritizing our town centers for affordable housing. You all have been working diligently with that, which means that we want to make sure these areas are walkable, bikeable, and have connections to the bike paths, to our lanes, our bike lanes, our transit centers, where multiple bus lines are convening. The plan identifies needed projects like Complete Streets project in the South Shore along State Line Avenue and Lakeshore Boulevard. That's a complete street project that's going to connect residents and visitors to services as well as recreation. Corridors are no different. Those are also where we need to design complete streets. That's with walkable, rollable spaces, bike access, transit connection, along with managed parking. Ideally, from our town centers, we would have services that could get you there. And that's also the idea, is that where you have those activity gatherings and gatherings of people, you would be taking transit to your recreation destination. Some of the projects in the plan include the West Shore Trail, Meeks Bay to DL Bliss, and the SR 28 trail improvements that we spoke of earlier at the committee. Next slide. The development of the plan would not be complete without an adaptive management process. And that is built throughout each cycle as we update it. This process helps us build the project list with all of our partners who actually build these projects, those local entities, and the programs necessary to achieve all of our goals. So we look back at performance using these metrics adopted by that transportation performance TAC. The process goes a little bit deeper, though, than just the T's. We do look at those ridership trends, those growth trends that we mentioned, our funding needs, as well as level of stress felt on the built environment. So those are all then folded back into the plan you see today. That collection of safety data is really important, and that's how we develop the plans and the projects that you have in the RTP today. That's rolling there. Now I got a little. So here we are. There are successes definitely to celebrate, but we also have a bit of a ways to go. Next slide. So now that I've brought you full speed, you're all planners now. I'm going to give you a stamp and certify you. We have a full vision that we have to achieve, but we can't do that without funding. If only we got to end here, right, and have a lovely plan ahead of us. The final step includes identifying foreseeable project funding for the life of that plan. And that is where we have to analyze everything from our environmental goals as well. The full project list and a funding appendices that describes all of these sources is in the plan. I think it's Appendix C. Project list is B, and C is the funding. So we've laid out all of those sources. It's all there. It is an iterative process, though, that I'm talking about. And now we have the vision, our goals, those projects, those programs. But now we have to deal with what can be actually foreseeably funded, which then we divide those projects and programs up. So we have an illustrative list and we have a foreseeable funded list. We've identified $2.45 billion in foreseeable funding. The remainder fall to that illustrative list totaling $1.82 billion. This is not that far off. The foreseeable funds from the last RTP was $2.42 billion. On the top right is a breakout of those funds. So we have federal, state, private, and local. Not to be overlooked, that blue shade there, that is our private and local share. It is larger than ever. And that's another one of those things that's worth celebrating. It's understandable, though, when you see these numbers, and they're in billions, for it to seem aspirational in nature, as it might be, but it's still grounded. This financial forecast is still grounded in past performance, funds allocated to the MPO, our past grants awarded to all our local partners, mitigation funds that we collect and that go to those programs and projects. It's also about the locals and the local programs raising money, like our TOT. Those are all in that forecast, and they contribute to, most importantly, what we are framing here as funding for the plan is a shared funding framework. And that's what we've got before us today, is everyone is all in and keeping things moving. Now, we want to continue to build on our public-private partnerships, like the microtransit we mentioned we have today, where we know that there are more efficiencies to be had. But another example is in the plan, as one of our projects is water transit, and that means clean water transit. So creativity is needed, and supporting those champions to bring forward those projects, you know, in conjunction with like that public-private partnership. Those are really important for us. Now, on the bottom here is a deeper look at transit funding. We heard about that from the very beginning. And unfortunately, as you heard, 2050 program of transit services is the same as what we have today. Now that's still, as costs, you know, increase every year, providing the same services we have 25 years from now still costs more money. So that is something, but we're not stopping there. We know we have to do more. There aren't simply enough foreseeable funds to get to that full vision for transit. So what we have done now and continue to do is work locally with our partners on the ground here. Many of you, our staff, as well as your staff, are continuing to work collectively so that transportation and legislative staff collaboratively are working with the local partners so that we can create more sustainable funding for transportation. And we're learning from one another, the successes on the North Shore, and what we're trying to do now, again, on the South Shore, so that we can continue to have certainty about getting to better transit. Now on to the final step. If I haven't put you to sleep yet. This is where we come back to our thresholds, where we began. Next slide, please. We must complete our environmental review. Under our hat as the TRPA, we have to adhere to federal regulations as well as the MPO, and of course our own environmental review process. So to start the analysis, we spent considerable time updating the travel demand model and getting that best available data. The plan does achieve the strictest of federal, state, and regional standards for carbon monoxide, ozone, particulates. We increase our visibility, and we reduce vehicle miles traveled with this plan. Many of the projects are carried over from the last RTP. I'd mentioned that iterative process. 91 foreseeably funded projects were analyzed. 35 of them are new. So after doing all of the analysis, the programs of the projects, we expect to meet those greenhouse gas targets. We expect to meet our vehicle miles traveled, per capita averages that we wanted. Goodness, this is just more challenging. Just remind myself to breathe. We're almost done. This is all possible, right? It's with those projects and programs that we're then able to achieve those VMT targets and those GHG targets. But it's also that additional code of ordinances that we want to kickstart. Those improvements will help us then by removing some barriers with those two updates. So understanding the importance of this plan, it must go beyond making sure we can receive transportation funding. That's what the plan does. It then allows us under that MPO authority to ensure our locals are getting those federal funds, are able to then build those projects. But it's also a mitigation measure in and of itself of our regional plan. We're not expanding highways, right? We're not adding like highway capacity here. We're really trying to manage that visitor travel on those state highways and US highways. That regional plan is very important to ensure the transportation system can function under various conditions. Next slide. So with that, our environmental analysis disclosed potential environmental impacts and therefore now includes some new mitigation measures. All of these details are in the environmental analysis. It's online and posted to the plan site, and anyone can request paper copies. We're happy to print those, send those to you. That's also available. But a quick summary here. We're going beyond the 2012 mitigation measures. We now have a new evacuation document. You might have heard a little bit about that. You had a presentation a few months ago. The regional evacuation plan, that was coordinated with 20 various public safety agencies. So we're adding in requirements to ensure transportation projects design, and even when they construct them, those traffic control plans, you've already seen some cones and flags up ready for the season. Those all need to be now coordinated with evacuation officials. That's in the county where those projects are located. So consideration of evacuation has been in our planning and design. And now this mitigation measure reinforces that project proponents will be coordinating with our evacuation officials throughout the process. So additionally, we had new biological resource mitigation measures. Those are addressing newly listed sensitive species. And the idea here is if those species are found, we can make adjustments on our roadways, like vehicle speeds could be reduced, working hours as well reduced. But mitigation measures that are directly related more to the projects in the plan are wildlife passages. Now, those are in line with new policies we've created to consider wildlife corridors. That's when designing the transportation project and during construction. Next slide. So this is it. This is the first. This is it. I mean, for me, and I can breathe, but this is just the beginning. This is a public hearing today. We released the plan last week, and we will be doing additional public hearings at the Tahoe Transportation Commission, our Advisory Planning Commission. And then when the public comment period closes, it's the formal period closing on May 23rd. We'll be gathering all of those comments, including the ones we heard today. Those are on the record as well. And I was trying to get to some of those. But then in July, we will go back and go back to those committees and commissions, as well as be before you, seeking your action on the plan. So that's after revising and looking back at the end, doing all of our required environmental updates as well. We have June reserved for any committee meetings that we might want to, that we may need for, going through some of those other items like the amendments we mentioned. So that's it. The music didn't start. No one brought the hook out and pulled me away. But, I do want to personally thank the full team. It's huge. But we also have one missing today, and that's Kara Richardson. She just had her baby on Monday afternoon. She worked up until the wee hours, the last minute of her, like literally Friday. And she made sure that this plan looked great and was ready to go. And so I definitely want to say, thanks to her. But it's also the full transportation team, Rebecca and Marcia really leading our environmental review. I'll end it with that. And I know I've forgotten folks, but thank you.
Michelle, you can breathe now. You did great. Thank you. And I do just want to pick up that last thing you said. This is the first of 3 public hearings. Right now, there's no action from the board. This is just for board members to make comments, have questions. So anyone have questions on the presentation we just heard? Ms. Gustafson.
Thank you. Michelle, great job, and to the whole team, really remarkable work. I know that our law enforcement agencies are starting to use the license plate readers, the flock cameras, and they're at all the entrances from Placer County in and out of the basin. Those can only be used for law enforcement purposes, but the data collected should give us numbers of vehicles maybe more accurately than some of the other types of systems. So I'm wondering what process we might be able to lead to incentivize the law enforcement agencies to at least be able to work to give us the data on numbers of vehicles and times of day, because they have incredible data on those license plate readers.
Thank you.
Of course, I have many more things I'd like to know, like where are they coming from? Are they commuters? Are they not? But I think I've been assured that it's confidential information, but the numbers to me might be really impactful for all of us. So have you had any conversations
Actually,
on that?
Yeah, the TTD project. That's
Yeah.
what this is. That's would be installing cameras or using the Caltrans cameras and collecting that data. And it goes beyond just numbers. And the idea is then you can kind of couple that with those big data sources to better understand all of that activity.
And I apologize, I don't know, are those up and running now?
So it's a pilot project. They do have, we're collecting data right now, and we're looking at how we're going to be disseminating that information with your right, total privacy, And we're really looking at what some of the things that people are interested in. What are those little nuggets and data pieces? So the idea of this first phase is to work with the DOTs in some of that smaller infrastructure. And then we would expand it to do just that. Now, that's not to say we couldn't use additional data from these other sources. And I'm sure our data team would love to be exploring that a little bit more. But that's the idea, is that real-time feed. The additional thing that's pretty cool about this is using AI. They can also almost predict where there would have been a potential crash, right? So now we know when a crash occurs or a fatality, right? But we don't know those near misses, and those are important. So this information that we're gathering is also a lot of good safety data, like where people should be walking or shouldn't be walking. Like there's a lot of great information to come. So right now we're gathering that, and we can probably do a presentation in the future too. I'm sure TTD would love to share some of their work on that. But yeah, the idea is just that, is all of those resources.
Well, the
coming.
resources are here, and if we can just tap in to continue to monitor that, and because I know we've had concerns from the public and others in the past
Yeah.
that the DOT information is very delayed. It isn't real time. We get it
That's right.
very long time after the fact.
Mhm.
And, you know, memories dim. People don't recall, gee, how bad was August of
For sure.
2002 versus today?
Mhm.
And so I
That
think
would be
having
real
that
time.
real-time
Like
data
real
would be
time.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Ms. Hill?
I also want to join in and applaud. The plan is beautiful, and really easy to understand if you're not living it like you are. So thank you so much. I think that the community will have once this starts getting disseminated out, we'll have a really nice time reviewing it and seeing kind of where we are today and what our vision is for the next few years. So did we weigh in on free transit versus paid for transit, and what did we say?
Yeah, we definitely heard those early comments that as much as we love our free transit and it's convenient, in the future, we may not be able to have free transit. The plan does assume right now that some of those longer runs, those regional routes, and some of our recreation corridors may need to be paid to help support the services. And you saw the shortfall. So we did look at that as well, Madam Chair. And we do understand in times like this, we have to be flexible.
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
great. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any other burning questions right now, but I do applaud the plan, and I'm really excited to see what the public has to say about it, since you've been doing so much outreach to get us here. So thank you also for your work and the team's work in making sure that we hear from our diverse communities. I know that's been a huge priority for us, so thank you.
All right, not seeing any other hands raised. So I did have a note about TMPO and TRPA. I just forgot to read my own notes ahead of time. So there we go. Before, there is no action required, but I do need a motion to adjourn as the TMPO and reconvene as the TRPA. Do I have a motion to adjourn and reconvene?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's move on then to agenda item 9, which is planning matters. Agenda item 9, the presentation on TRPA compliance and enforcement framework under the regional plan. Information on this item can be found on page 121, and I believe Director Reagan is going to present.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director, and we have some staff members that are going to join, I think, up at the dais. So while they're taking their seats, I will just kick us off and give you the lay of the land for this item. It is informational, and I'm going to run through some context setting information, some slides, and then we really do have a team of our staff that are going to be assembled, because I think this might spark some questions. It's a topic that we've talked about in various platforms over the last couple of years at committee meetings and public meetings. Public's expressed a lot of interest in this topic. And so I do have some folks that are going to join me. Steve Sweet is here. We have Graham St. Michelle. I want to thank Marcia Birch for being here under transportation, but she is a member of our legal team as well. Dennis Sabaglo, Shay Navarro coming up to the dais. So it really is intended to be interactive. And if you can stop me as I'm going through any of the slides if you have questions, but it's something that the topic is of great interest. I'm very passionate about it because as I took over this position as director coming up on 2.5 years ago now, this was something I heard from the community and from our staff that we needed more resources in the area of compliance and enforcement. So we've added additional staff. We've greatly enhanced the size and scope of our legal team. We've onboarded Graham St. Michelle as our new general counsel, and it's just I think important to speak to some of the things that people may not see behind the scenes that's going on and offer an opportunity for the board to dive in a little bit deeper. But really appreciate the team that's assembled here, and I will take the next slide and we'll dive right in. So compliance and enforcement and why they matter. And we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between the two because there is a significant difference between those two words and how we implement the regional plan. But the bottom line for all of us and for why you're here today, why the community is here, is Lake Tahoe and the mission of TRPA and protecting our lake and supporting the communities around the basin and beyond. It's really central to how we operate, and we do that in a number of ways. And why? Why does it matter? I mean, just look around. Driving to this meeting this morning, the lake was resplendent. It was incredible. But we know that there are many threats to the lake, and we have to work every single day to keep it that way. And the people here at the dais beside me, back at the office, through the community, through our partners, are doing that every day. And it reminds me a little bit of, what you don't see sometimes that really matters. And you don't see underground vaults that are separating fine sediment from getting into the lake to run off roadways, but they're there and they're doing their job. And we don't often talk about it. I started my career in the power industry. When the lights are working, everything's fine. As soon as they go out, you really realize we love electricity. It powers our world, and you take for granted what goes on behind the scenes. And there's a lot of truth to the teams that are working every day in enforcement and compliance. And we take it for granted, and it's a chance for us to expose the good work that's going on and then where we need to do better. And we want to highlight some of the changes that we're making. But over time, we have been building a culture of compliance in the basin, and I want to explain how we're doing that and how that has manifested over the course of some decades, and how the enforcement works under the compact through our regional plan, all designed to accelerate and achieve our thresholds, to maintain and achieve our environmental threshold standards. So the next slide, please. So looking at purpose and focus of the work in these two areas, how do we make sure that the rules that we have are followed and that we are advancing our goals to achieve those environmental standards? And that terminology that I wanted to draw a distinction here around between compliance, ensuring that our rules and our permits are following and adhered to, versus enforcement, which is investigating and pursuing violations. And you may just instantly conjure up an image of a construction site that relates to both of those from time to time. But there's so much more that we do through the regional plan, throughout the agency, that may not be obvious. And that is looking at things like our code enforcement and violation around development and discharge, but also our program on the water. We have a watercraft education team that operates on Lake Tahoe. We have invasive species issues and intercepting boats that may be contaminated with various species that could harm Lake Tahoe. And we've got certainly a whole distinct program around the shoreline and the shore zone ordinances, which this board adopted in 2018, very specific to shoreline development like piers and buoys. And then, of course, there's tree removal, and a lot of the publicity that's been over the years around TRPA's role in enforcement related to unauthorized tree removal. And we want to talk about that a little bit as well, because that is part of the story. But in terms of compliance, we are relying on education and goodwill of the community to do the right thing. But first, people have to understand why we have the rules that we have. We heard a little in public comment this morning at the residential level. Sometimes it's not intuitive, policies around land coverage or permitting timelines or grading, and we need to explain that. And that education goes hand in hand with compliance. But sometimes there are problems, and then we have enforcement issues, and we do investigations. We have a lot of dialogue with project applicants, and we have to rely on partners. And then ultimately, we might go through a process that I'll explain in just a minute. But the next slide will look at the legal framework and how we derive our authority. And what I wanted to point out here is that it's really very unique under the compact and the way TRPA was chartered and operates, that's different than other regional planning bodies, other council of governments. Oftentimes regional entities are more on the policy and planning space, which we are. We are a planning agency, but the compact gives us this very unique authority. It's basically a regional planning entity with the teeth of enforcement, and that's very unique. And so our legal framework is really structured from the compact, from our regional plan, and gives us the opportunity through our rules of procedure, our code of ordinance, delegation, memorandum of understanding with other partners, local governments, for example. All of that rolls up into a big framework that really stems from the compact. And as the graph indicates on the right, we're all rowing in the same direction, adhering to those standards that fall in 10 categories. The lake clarity is one of 140 standards, as you heard in your briefing on the threshold evaluation report. Lake clarity, keeping Tahoe blue is of paramount importance, obviously, but we have many other categories all the way from soil conservation and vegetation to recreation and noise. Those 10 categories are a part of everything that we do in terms of our compliance and enforcement program. I'll take the next slide. And it really is a spectrum. And so think of prevention, as an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. It really goes the same in the work that we do here. That education, that guidance, and how we get property owners to understand the rules, whether it's a residential property, a commercial project, or larger that people see, or a local government, even environmental improvement program projects also are adhering to these standards. And so working very diligently on that end, of course, is the goal of compliance. And then you can think of it going to the other direction of penalties for noncompliance. And I think it's important to also note within that authority, we're not a law enforcement agency. We do not have law enforcement powers, and that's something that may get lost in conversation. So we have civil penalties. We negotiate with project applicants, and we bring the legal committee and this board potential resolutions for violations. And so we don't impose penalties per se. We negotiate and we go forward, and they go into further education and special studies that advance our goals and our thresholds. So we work to keep the compliance on the education and prevention, but we certainly have the tools to take corrective action, and we do every single day out in the world to make sure that we are either correcting something that's going off course or addressing something after the fact. But once something goes off course, damage can be done. So we'd prefer to catch things before they happen in that direction. So the culture of compliance that I spoke about, if we go to the next slide, really grew out of board discussion around this topic. If you think of historic timelines of TRPA, we're in our 55th year of the compact. It was amended in 1980. We got a regional plan in 1987. It took a while, for the community to even understand, what is this regional plan? What is the difference between what the city or the county might be doing and what TRPA is doing? And there was just a lot of work to do to educate. So we started building this culture of compliance through education and outreach. And so you see in the slide a lot of outreach related to community events and tabling and farmers markets and all kinds of town hall meetings and gatherings. We also publish our Tahoe In Depth educational environmental newspaper. And we even have our board chair doing podcasts and doing articles in local media publications, not just local, but regional and statewide. And then we also contribute to many different initiatives that we partner with. That is a graph on the far right of landscape conservation idea book through our environmental program improvement program at the Tahoe Keys. And the landscaping that's happening there directly affects the issues related to invasive species and water quality in the Tahoe Keys and beyond. We have multiple websites for our erosion control best management practices program. We have the Lake Tahoe info platform where you can get information on your property. None of that was possible 20 years ago. We've advanced so much real-time information that property owners and members of the community can access. We have a handbook for best management practices in landscaping because people inherently want to do the right thing, but it is complicated and it's sometimes hard to know what that right thing is. And so we try to make it as easy as we can. And we know there's also more work to do. And then if you look at the next slide, a snapshot of some of the headlines, I thought for those of you who've been on the board more recently, this might be different than what you might have related to from the early 2000s. If Shelley were here, she would remember the dominant headlines of the time that were about violations and tree removal. And you can see some of the, those first in the aughts of the 2001 to 2005. And that really built up a reputation of heavy-handedness. And at the time, again, we were only a little over a decade into the regional plan, and there was a lot of attention around some pretty high-profile violations that came before this board. But the board at the time wanted to recognize the need for more education, and they were concerned that we were, creating, let's think of it as a speed trap. If a local government sets the speed trap to fill their coffers, and that was a conversation of this board. Like, let's not try to do gotcha here. Let's work with the community to prevent violations. And so that was a big discussion that this board had, and that's when the investment in education really began about 20 some years ago. And so if you look at those headlines on the left, it's easy to also understand how people did develop a fear of TRPA. And you hear that at the podium. We had people coming in the front counter that were afraid to share their plans for fear we might find something wrong and they'd get in trouble and throw them in jail. We don't have law enforcement power, but that was a real perception. And certainly we want people to do the right thing, but we don't want people to be afraid to walk in our front door. So we've really been very intentional about creating this culture of compliance to explain why we have the rules we have. And then if you fast forward to more recently, we look at a project like Homewood that you all acted on in January to insist that we have public access for recreation on that mountain. That was a whole compliance thread that was weaving through that master plan and permit update that you took back just a few months back. And so it has evolved. At the same time, we want to make sure people know the rules are important and that people need to follow the rules. So we use the media, to tell that story. And we've got some pretty cool things that are happening that I wanted to share with you in the next couple slides. So we're going to keep rolling on a couple more slides here, and then we're going to get to your questions. I wanted to dwell on the fact that this interdisciplinary nature sometimes gets missed. And when you hear public comments that we only have a couple of staff that do enforcement or compliance, that just isn't correct. We've got a whole team of people that some of them are here to answer your questions, from communications that publish our newspaper to our watercraft team, certainly the legal team. And I want to recognize Jack Mensick, who worked very hard on helping me put this presentation together, who's sitting on the front row and is here to answer questions. But we've got our finance team that we collect securities when projects happen, and we can't return them until the property is in full compliance. And our finance team is integral in managing all of those different funds that we hold in trust and mitigation dollars, for example. We have erosion control best management practices. We do the boat inspections, and not just TRPA, but also the Resource Conservation District and other partners. And then on the housing front, we've been talking through the Regional Planning Committee, the Tahoe Living Working Group, about deed restrictions and the importance of compliance and enforcement of deed restrictions. And so that's a very large emerging piece of our compliance picture at TRPA. So it truly is interdisciplinary, and the compliance team that Steve Sweet manages has inspectors that are going around the lake, and we did add a new position there. We also have other teams that are doing compliance in their day-to-day. And so the process of compliance is highlighted in the next slide. And that's just kind of digging down into these different program areas of the agency, our erosion control, water quality, BMP, best management practices. Every home that sells in Tahoe has to disclose, have you done your erosion control or not? We have to work with the real estate community on that, and our staff is very diligent there. We have incentives through the regional plan update of 2012 for people to do their best management practices, to use things like permeable pavement, so pavement that will infiltrate water, and then you can get some incentives for a project. But that has to be tracked and administered. We've got recertification that's done, and I'm going to give you some statistics on that. So even when best management practices are done, you have to maintain those BMPs, and we have a team that goes out to work with the community around that. And then also, these are all available in the parcel tracker through laketahoeinfo.org, and you can click and people can avail themselves of that information. And we've mentioned our aquatic invasive species inspections. You can see on the right the picture of one of the inspectors doing their job, and that's a huge, huge piece of work that's just gearing up for this summer. And we've added roving inspectors for non-motorized watercraft with the discovery of the New Zealand mud snail. And then compliance and reporting and providing you with audits and annual information is part of it. So the next slide explains our objectives and, why are we doing this? Why does it matter? We want to implement the TMDL, the total maximum daily load. That is the water quality restoration plan for the lake, ultimately to get back to 100 feet, but ideally just to maintain around an average clarity of about 80 feet. And that's something that we're all rowing in the same direction with the state of California, the state of Nevada, the EPA, all the local jurisdictions, and those erosion control best management practices roll up to support the overall goals of that program. And we're keeping over 500,000 pounds of sediment out of the lake every year through that. And our staff is working on projects to quantify that information. The invasive species inspections are certainly lowering the risk of new invaders coming into the lake and managing those that are already here, like the mud snails, like invasive plants. And just last year alone, we intercepted almost 60 boats that were dirty, that had some kind of form of invasive species. And we decontaminate those or quarantine those boats if necessary. And then on the deed restriction, we're seeing really excellent compliance with the new programs that we've been launching. We have a new reporting system, more work to do on some of the older programs, but we're seeing some good results there. If we take the next slide, we'll talk about how we identify violations. And this is a question that we get a lot. Like, we cannot be in every place at every location around the lake 24 hours a day, 365. So we rely on our partners, we rely on the community, and we hear from the community. People report issues on our website, on an online forum. We get phone calls. I get emails every single day about issues that are going on. And our compliance team, as part of permits and as part of our day-to-day work, are doing a lot of inspections around the basin, monitoring, auditing. And then on tree removal, for example, we also have our public lands partners. In the past, we've had violations where people inadvertently or unintentionally, or others who were willful, going onto public lands and removing trees. And so that we work with our California Tahoe Conservancy partners, the Forest Service, and Nevada Division of State Lands, and we issue, we get involved in those investigations as a matter of business. So there's a lot of ways that we are doing that compliance. And then on the spectrum in the next slide, we just talk about overall enforcement, and that is going from that early piece. If you look at that compliance spectrum of like compliance to, education all the way to corrective action, this is the corrective action piece. And it's more than you might expect to see. There's a very well-documented process that our team forms. Whether it's investigating, this is once something has been flagged for a potential violation. And our team can get into more of the details if you have questions, but we have an investigation. We meet internally among our permitting staff, our legal staff, ask the project applicant to potentially take these, corrective actions if it's warranted, depending on the case. Our team may do a correction notice. We may do a cease and desist. We'll have discussions. Then there may be a preparation of a notice of violation. Occasionally, there's a show cause hearing, which the legal team can walk you through when that might be required. And then we're working to resolve this. We want to see the change fixed, and we want to see the environmental condition restored if necessary. But it takes a lot of conflict resolution, and Steve Sweet has just been amazing for his 20+ years of service here to mediate these issues and come to some agreement that we know will benefit the lake, but that will address the situation. There may be mitigation. There may be, if you move down the spectrum into the action, we may have, and resolution, we may have something called a double filing fee. This is part of how we resolve these violations. That may not be something that ever makes it to the board for a violation settlement, but we may require the project applicant to pay double what their filing fee would be for permitting to address whatever action needs to happen and to resolve that. If you continue down to the far right, the last resort certainly is litigation. You know, if we can't come to you with a violation settlement, which again tiers back to our compact authority. And just as a reminder, the compact allows us to negotiate fines of $5,000 per day per violation. That comes right out of the compact in terms of the legal authority of you as board members in this agency. But if we can't settle, then we have to go to court. And that is a very expensive and time-consuming process. But it's been done. We're in the process of a few of those cases right now, and that's the last resort. But we have that ability under the compact to do it. So just a couple of statistics to look at some of the results that we've had in the next slide. If you think of our team of 75 people at the agency, and you look at the amount of work that's going on, it's really impressive. I mean, more than 800 project inspections are happening a year. That's an average of over the course of about a decade. That's substantial work that our team is very diligent in, whether it's an open permit or revisiting a previous permit to make sure we didn't miss anything. There's about 130 code violations that are resolved at staff level with legal input. We've had about 23 staff level penalties with the double filing fee that I mentioned. We have about 6 settlement agreements that come before you to act. So 6 versus, those other numbers, if you just get that appreciation for the amount of work that the team is doing behind the scenes. And then if you even look further at local governments, there's about 2,000 site inspections that our partners are doing under their MOUs. So all told, I mean, there's about 10 inspections per working day happening around the basin on any given day. And particularly that's accelerated during the construction season because in winter, we still are going out to the field, but the sites are not as active. So it's a big chunk of work. But we can do better. The next slide, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we can do better in terms of process improvements, and we're scaling up and we're looking at the bigger picture. The early days of science were showing like the need for this parcel by parcel execution. We haven't lost focus on that, but we're scaling up to more regional area-wide programs. Ski Run to Marina Green Infrastructure Planning, that is a program that Shay Navarro can delve into more detail, but looking in the city, in the area that's one of the most developed areas in the basin, looking from the mountain, if you think Ski Run at the top of Heavenly all the way down to the marina and all the infrastructure that goes along with that, it's a very high priority watershed. There's a lot of runoff and discharge that we need to address. And so we're prioritizing the erosion control best management practice enforcement and compliance in that area. And so that's just one example that we're doing to scale up. And I mentioned earlier the maintenance of those best management practices. It's not a one and done. Just for example, we issued 1,500 certificates over the last decade plus of best management practices that were maintained, and we're continuing to actively work on that. And we're also scaling up the deed restriction work through mandatory compliance reports and audits. And again, Karen can answer some questions if you have them in that direction. Continuing on with a couple of process improvements, we're always looking for clear communication with our MOU, Memorandum of Understanding partners, like the Forest Service, like utility districts. We're meeting with them constantly to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of following those guidelines. And we have new partnerships potentially on no wake zone. There's a bill going through the Nevada legislature. We hope to get that through California as well to clarify the rules around that 600-foot no wake zone around the shoreline so that law enforcement can have the ability to enforce should they want to support what we're doing. But there's some discrepancy in state law that we're trying to clean up. And we've actually made a really wonderful amount of progress on abandoned vessels. A few years ago, some of you might remember, there are boats sometimes that capsize on the lake. We have incredible wind. Boats become unmoored. There can be issues with fuel. It was very unclear who was responsible for that. And it took actually a couple of years working with the Coast Guard, the Lahontan Water Board, State of Nevada, all the agencies, U.S. Army Corps, to determine how do you get a dirty boat out of the lake that's capsized when the owner has walked away from that boat. It's very complicated. That's someone's property. So we've actually made some incredible progress, and Steve Sweet has been leading the charge there. We were able to tap some special funds to support local government entities, and I think the Marla Bay capsize is up top, and the Camp Richardson is just a couple weeks ago of that one coming out of the lake. And we were able to support local law enforcement to pull them out of the water because there was a lot of that going on. And no offense to anybody, but that's what happens because it's a complicated process. But our team was able to step in and to make a meaningful difference there. And the communities really appreciate it. We've been getting some very complimentary emails about our work on that. And then just a reorganization piece that's recent at the agency. We have restructured our formerly research and analysis team to break two distinct functions. And we've got a reporting and accountability team now that's looking to enhance a dashboard for compliance around big projects. The Homewood Master Plan brought a lot of questions out. How do we track compliance with these very large projects, whether it's the Heavenly Resort Master Plan or the Homewood Master Plan or a big redevelopment project? So we now have a dedicated team that's building a new dashboard to help our planners and our other staff do that. And our science and data team will be more on the GIS and technical work that backs everything that we do. And so Dan Segan, our Chief Science and Policy Officer, will be managing the science and data team, things like GIS and other experts. And that will all underlie a new focus around compliance and tracking and making it more public and more transparent so the community can see all the good things that are happening and then point out to us where we need to keep improving. So we're really excited about this reorganization. I think the team is geared up and ready to go. Ken Caseman is here to answer questions around that, but we hope that that will allow the community to see more clearly about the work that's underway and to help us continue to improve as we go. So just to wrap up, and we'll take your questions, wanted to make sure that the message was loud and clear that compliance and enforcement is a fundamental part of our work at the agency under the regional plan. We are committed to it. We are not immune that there are new threats that are coming down the line to this agency, and we have to be innovative, we have to be responsive, and we're trying to do that. We're proud of the progress, but we know there's a lot more work to do. One example to leave you with that I think I'm incredibly proud of our team for stepping up even ahead of other areas around the discovery of the golden mussels in the Bay Delta area. You all, through the action that you took to update the fee for invasive species inspection, basically blessed our new policy that if you bring a visiting boat into the lake this summer, you're going to have to be decontaminated. That's a big deal. We're hiring new staff. We have to educate, thousands of boaters that this is the policy. People may show up without knowing that. We're going to have to deal with that at the inspection areas. But that is an example of compliance that we're being proactive because other water bodies in the area have closed down because they just can't handle it. And it's too much of a threat. So very proud of the team and just to use that as an example that we are taking seriously the threats that are before us. Improving our deed restriction monitoring to protect workforce housing and to make sure that our program, if the board is taking courageous action to try to make housing more affordable in the basin, we want to make sure that deed restrictions are being followed. So that's an area of ongoing work. And then getting into more area-wide stormwater treatment planning is very exciting, and it dovetails in with the land use and housing side, because if we can incentivize projects to go for affordable in town centers, then we want to make sure that we're addressing water quality impacts and improving the situation that currently exists in so much rundown and old development today that's below standard. So with that, I'll wrap up, and thank you, Madam Chair. We'll take your questions.
Thank you, Julie. And again, a reminder to the board, we have no action on this item, so just any questions or comments. Mr. Keycover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly appreciate all the information. I think it's really helpful. I'm curious if there's any what the dynamic is in terms of for enforcement between violations of sort of TRPA code and issues with conditions and permits, right? And how does that get balanced out? And when we're conditioning projects, do we think about what our ability is to actually enforce them?
Thank you for the question. I'll start and I'll turn it to the team to jump in. Julie Reagan here from TRPA, Executive Director staff. That is a huge consideration. You know, I would say, having been at the agency for 21 years, we've always had a very complex system, and it is hard to find consensus in a complex and controversial project. And sometimes the tendency is to load on a lot of conditions to make sure that we find the compromise necessary to get a positive action to move forward. And we've learned over time that is a very well-intentioned process, and there were good reasons for that. But it has become challenging to enforce and to be consistent in that. And so we've learned as we have gone. And I think what we've been trying to, with Graham's leadership as general counsel, is to make sure that when we do have a big project that's coming forward, that we're very clear-eyed about what we can maintain and enforce and do it in a transparent fashion, so that there's not a disagreement. Because what we've seen happen years ago, you know, we would have one idea of being in compliance and the applicant or the project might have a different. And then that takes a lot of time to work out. Ultimately, might have to come before you to work out, to revise a permit. So I'd say we've made a lot of progress in that, but we go into it with a realistic vision of like what we can enforce and what we can adequately monitor. I know some members of the board have expressed interest too, that we make sure we consider the costs of those and make sure that the applicant is bearing the fair share of cost recovery for monitoring conditions. And that's something that we're also taking into effect. So that's kind of a broad strokes answer, but I'll ask Graham if you want to jump in.
New department. Yeah, I mean.
Yep. And the new department that we're setting up, I think
Right.
Graham was going to mention. You want to go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Julie covered all that very well, but just thinking about, you know, on the outset of like what kind of expectations and promises that we're getting in these permits, and we're, you know, increasingly entering into more novel permits. And so we have to think about that at the beginning. And then this new department, because a lot of our sort of the way things have been set up very good to track, you know, some initial pre-construction permit conditions, but then some of what happens, you know, in the future, like we saw with Event Center, and we've set up a little bit with Homewood. You know, what goes, you know, we can't make sure that we can't have those permits going in a drawer once something's been constructed. We have to keep monitoring. So hopefully that new department will help us with that.
Now, John Hester here, just to add to beat this into the ground, I guess. About 10 years ago, code compliance was part of legal. And what we did was we moved it in with permitting and actually asked Steve and his staff to work with the permitting staff to look at the conditions, so that we kind of came up, they're not totally standardized, but they're more standardized, and asked Steve and his staff to say, is this a condition I really can enforce? Because we had, you know, I'll give you an anecdotal story. We had a report that came in every year on the water flow in a stream. And it came to this particular planner who's not here anymore. And I said, why do you get that report? And he said, well, it was a condition on a project, you know, 10 years ago. I said, what do you do with it? We file it away. So we're trying, part of, you know, we want to have good compliance, but we also want to get rid of things that are meaningless. And so moving Steve in with the permitting group, I think, made a big difference.
But yeah, no, I appreciate all that. I'd encourage us to think about our ability as we're approving projects, our ability to actually uphold what we say we want to do is, I think, something we need to focus on, especially on big projects. It's just when I first heard how many conditions were on the permit for the event center, I'm like, well, how do you expect anybody to comply with all of that all the time, right? It's just unrealistic. So thank you.
We also use securities to ensure compliance of all our projects. So, you know, some have larger securities, and then we have taken, you know, our process all the way, you know, through settlement or possibly litigation on certain permit requirements if they're not met, you know, by that final inspection period time, or through the project itself. It's bad enough.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Lane? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Lane, and then Ms. Fastinos, and then Mr. Honigman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question around vegetation management. Both El Dorado County and the city of South Lake Tahoe have very similar new vegetation management codes. And as we all know, around our knowledge of fire and being more resistant to, we're told that within 5 feet of our structure, if there are trees or bushes, firewood, all those things, they have to be removed. And I'm just wondering if TRPA is thinking about just allowing people to do that and not have to call and wait for an inspection to get a permit to try to have a tree removed. I mean, if other agencies are requiring that to happen, is there a way that we can facilitate that will make it easier for the residents to comply?
I'm happy to jump in, and others, and Shay and Steve can weigh in. But thank you, Member Lane, for the question. Julie Reagan here. The answer is yes, and I think it's important to talk about the work that's been done in this space. Really going back to the gondola fire of 2002, but then certainly with the Angora fire of 2007, we're coming up in June of the 18th anniversary of Angora. And I put the headlines up in the slide to make a point, because when we've had a lot of media around tree removal, and it permeated into the space of, you cannot cut any trees down, right? And then people would say, TRPA won't let me cut a tree down, and they won't let me break my pine needles. And that wasn't correct, but that was the conventional wisdom. And so after Angora, we worked with the Blue Ribbon Bi-State Fire Commission. We sat down with the fire service, all the local fire chiefs and districts, the conservation districts, and we looked at our stormwater erosion control program to mesh that with fire defensible space. And we all agreed to a series of implementation, like the 5-foot moat is completely, we call it the moat, that's the rock 5 gravel trench around your foundation. That's in our standard for erosion control. We streamlined the process for tree removal. Homeowners can remove a tree at 14 inches, diameter at breast height without a permit at all. They can call their local fire district if it's a defensible space. They don't even have to call us. We have a registered professional forester, Bruce Barr, who did 1,150 permits last year. He gets back to people in 24 to 48 hours. He is marking trees all day long, every day, for structural integrity that are bigger, than those 14-inch around trees. And so the answer is yes. And we've tried to message that to the community, that we not only permit that, we support it. And we're doing it at our office as well, marking trees for defensible space. But I'll see if Shay or Steve want to build on that.
Yes, thanks, Julie. This is Shay Navarro, TRPA's Watersheds and Water Quality Program Manager. The 5-foot non-combustible perimeter around any structure is required by TRPA. That's our standard. It's in our BMP handbook. We put it in permit conditions. We do training with fire defensible space contractors through cooperative extension. So it's something we fully support. Sometimes you'll have a tree that's super big within the 5-foot zone. It doesn't mean you always have to take the tree out. That tree needs to be properly limbed up, and there's other measurements for that, but there shouldn't be anything TRPA is doing to restrict people maintaining that 5-foot non-combustible perimeter.
And I'm just a follow-up. I'm not sure that I'm hearing that TRPA is restricting, but it's that you still have to go through the process of permitting. You have one person, as you mentioned last year, issued 1,100 permits that removed over 4,000 trees, so multiple trees per permit. But I guess what I'm saying is they still have to go through the process of getting the permit. And I'm wondering if if that could be eliminated, or what the why TRPAs would be concerned about eliminating that.
Thank you for the question, and I'll clarify, and certainly staff can jump in, but Julie Reagan here. Thank you for pointing this out, because those permits that our forester are writing are for non-defensible space trees. Those, it's a tree that's into your sewer line, maybe, that's creating an issue, undermining your foundation. People can call their fire department or district immediately for anything that's defensible space. That was a permitting streamlining action that we took after the Angora fire, just as we raised the size from 6 inches around to 14 inches. So if there's a tree that's under 14 inches around at breast height, people can just deal with it. If it's bigger than that, they can call their fire district and they don't have to call TRPA. If it's something that's about a foundational undermining, they can call us, but they can also go online. They come to our front counter, and it is, people have no problem with the process that we found. Anything we want to add to that, Steve?
Oh, no, I think you said everything.
And next, I think I had Ms. Fastinas and then Mr. Honigman.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, just compliments. I mean, the amount of work that's being done by the staff is just astronomical. And what I also sense is that we get a lot of questions on these issues from the public. And having a dashboard, which we may already have that I'm just not aware of, and we're raising the public awareness, I think, to the members of the public that regularly attend these meetings. How can we convey, what's being done by staff on a regular basis, so that it's very clear that compliance issues that are improving lake quality are an ongoing priority. And it just seems to me, and I mean, there's public communication is challenging, and you never get to the people probably that you need to get to about 5% of the time. But I think it just is a good way of making sure that these issues are really highlighted, that there is a tremendous amount of work being done on a regular basis. And how can we do that, frankly, in an efficient way that doesn't create more of a burden for staff, but that's maybe part of our dashboard. And again, maybe that's being done and I'm just not aware of it, but that would be my strong recommendation.
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you, Member Fastinas, for the question. Julie Reagan here. Couldn't agree more. I mean, we have so much more work to do. We do feature stories in our Tahoe In-Depth newspaper. What we've also seen, I think, in recent years, which is part of what you hear at the podium and from other public outreach venues, since COVID, a lot of properties have changed hands. There's a lot of new members of the community, either members of the community that maybe had a part-time residents that are here more, that weren't as plugged in. Properties have changed hands, and people just, they're not as familiar with the compact, with TRPA, with the rules. And so the paper has been a key source of information. I'd like to do that. I'd like to do 2 more issues a year. That's something that we're working on. But I think the opportunity with the dashboard and then to get the information out around the dashboard is key. Something that we also do that's very important that I want to recognize the staff here and others, like on the communications team and in the permitting and compliance team. We do seminars at real estate offices. The realtors are a massive arm, a point of contact to people that are interested in property, people that are already homeowners, and we do programs, TRP, we have a whole TRPA webinar series, TRPA 101, that's been ongoing for the last year or two. But for 20 years, we've been really trying to ramp up with the real estate community to get the message out, particularly to prospective home buyers, that they do have more requirements than they might have in other places. And so the dashboard would give us another platform to really promote more, and we plan to do it. Please.
John Hester, for the record, the new reporting and accountability department, monitoring department, is all about, staff said, well, what's the distinction between that and research and analysis? We said, well, research and analysis, the old department and the part Dan took over, looks at external things like air quality, water quality, monitoring that are not a result of our actions. We said to our new reporting and accountability department, we need you to tell the story of what the internal actions TRPA is taking. So it's tracking conditions, how many development rights are being shifted around, or how many deed restrictions have we checked on housing and so forth. So, because we realize there's a lot of stuff that we do internally that we just assume, like Julie said, well, we just assume you all know that behind the scenes we're doing all these things. And we realize that you don't, and the public doesn't. So that's really the charge. And Ken Kaseman's the new director, well, he's formerly our research and analysis, now reporting and accountability. He's actually going around and interviewing people in our department and others to see what all are you doing that we should report to the board and to the public. So he's in the process right now of defining that. If you have some ideas, you or any other board member, please shoot them to Ken, because he, we've charged him with, I think he's about 30 days into a 90-day process to come back to us and tell us, what's this going to look like? So your input's great.
And if we could call it the Ministry of Muggle Monitoring. Is it too early for Harry Potter jokes? Sorry, Mr. Honigman.
Thanks. I really think it's important, and I think we've made some steps, to not create regulations that we can't enforce. I think, we learned on the event center and have changed that, and learned for Homewood. And I think that should apply to every regulation. When I went through this process about 10 years ago of redeveloping an abandoned property. And so I feel like I've seen it, I've interacted. I was really pleasantly surprised with TRPA, but coming from San Francisco, that, it was a very low bar, but I was amazed how easy the processes were. But, one thing that always kind of got me was I had to put in a lot of money in fixes for BMPs, and they've just sat there for the last 10 or 12 years, and no one's checked on them. I don't know what to do with them, how to keep them working most effectively. And I just feel like it makes it feel like I spent a lot of money and no one really gives a crap about it. Like, I think from the start, all the way along, we need to support those regulations. And some of that is enforcement. Like, I have to pay to have my backflow preventer checked every year. And that's a couple $100 and whatever. I call the same guy, he comes out. If every few years I had to pay to have the BMPs inspected, it would just make me feel better about having made that initial investment, even though it's costing me something, because then I'd think, oh, okay, it was worthwhile. And my understanding is that, we want to get away from that, and we want to get into stormwater management, but we don't have it now, and we won't have it everywhere. And that's a tool, BMPs, that we're using for a lot of our reduction in load. So I think we need to be monitoring those and making sure that they're all enforced. My understanding is, while the realtors can be a great source, they're also kind of nod, wink, winking, like, yeah, you don't really have to do this stuff once, once the deal's done, you're supposed to, but no one's going to check. And so I just, if we have a regulation, I want to make sure it's enforced and it's monitored over time, and we get the benefits that we say we're getting from it. So that is one where I think we've learned, and we're doing better on that one particular issue. Maybe we can do even better. And then I had a question too about with the invasives, because I remember reading about the golden mussel. They were saying, it could have been in someone's waders from, it's not necessarily just from a boat. No, that was a mud snail. I can't even get my invasive species correct. But with the new one, the golden mussel, are we checking all the other, or offering people a way to do self-checks or something for, like, I have sit-on-top kayaks that, have 10 different water pockets that could be contaminated. They're only up in Tahoe, but I imagine a lot of people are coming in and out with all this stuff, and the aquatics are terrifying to me, the invasive species. So I was just curious if there's anything we can do about some of those other sources of contamination.
Thank you, Vice Chair Henningsen. For the record, Julie Reagan. I'm going to start, and then I'm going to ask Shay to weigh in on your first question and Dennis to weigh in on your second. The short answer for the BMP, best management practice erosion control, is that we are enforcing on those in different ways. You know, the regional plan had a lot of provisions to incentivize that work, not only to get certificates of completion, but then to do maintenance. And that was, you know, any pier or buoy lakefront parcel now has to get those done. And we saw dramatic compliance through that. Any remodel that a person takes on at the local level has to show that their BMPs are functioning. And then we do have strategic enforcement of maintenance around the basin based on water quality science of like where are the highest priority areas of catchment. Because what we learned through water quality science, through the TMDL, total maximum daily load, is that not every parcel is the same. And we have high priority, just like we have high risk fire zones around the lake that are different because of conditions, the same is true for water quality. So we have prioritized how resources are deployed from our agency and from our partners through the Resource Conservation District. We're doing consolidating erosion control with fire defensible space. So we've got joint action going on there. But I'll let Shay round out the answer to that question.
Thank you, Julie. Shay Navarro for the record. So one area where I feel like we've made some changes is it is now a standard condition of any permit that all existing BMPs have to be maintained. So that gives us the opportunity when an inspector, whether it's TRPA's inspector or a local jurisdiction MOU partner goes out to the site, they have the backing to look at all the BMPs, not just for, let's say, the BMPs for the new addition or deck or whatever's being built on a property. And your backflow preventer example, you know, if you don't do that, the water purveyor has the ability to shut your water off, and that'll really motivate you to get that done. And we're a little bit different. We don't control the water supply. You know, we don't have anything really that we can shut off. We can't turn the lights off if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, other than list you as under enforcement in our database, which we do. We track every property in the basin, and anyone who's received a letter from us, it says there you are under enforcement. We've had, in particular, we've been working a lot in our Mountain to Marina project area. We've had letters go out to properties to maintain BMPs. We're working on sending over 600 letters out to properties in that watershed that are in the most sensitive areas, looking at it kind of more holistically of like, where are these priority locations, and working in a watershed kind of capacity. And another thing that we do is, you know, if local jurisdictions are using parcel BMPs to get TMDL credit for commercial and multifamily properties, if your certificate issue date is more than 5 years old, you're only getting 50% of the load reduction, not the full 100%. So we work with the local jurisdictions to identify, you know, where are TMDL priority areas. We contact the properties in those locations. The ones that perform maintenance, they get reissued their certificate with a current date, and the local jurisdiction can get full credit for that parcel, whereas they would only get 50% if they were more than 5 years old. Yeah, so that kind of covers the points that I wanted to make.
And we'll get to your next part of your question with Dennis in a second, but I did want to build on Shay's point, because I think it's really important also in how the regional plan fans out through the basin that is often not intuitive, you know, to Ms. Faustino's point. And local jurisdictions, you know, it's a series of incentives and disincentives. And the incentives have been working around this, and an incentive around compliance with erosion control BMPs and in furtherance of our clarity goals for the total maximum daily load. Local jurisdictions in their annual compliance audits don't get full allocations if it's not, and that has happened, you know, as we know in the last action that you took just last month on allocations distribution. So there's a number of ways that we're getting compliance, and I did want to mention 1,500 certificates issued since, over the last decade plus for maintenance. So, I mean, and that's just what our staff is doing. That's not on top of the permits that have come in for a remodel or a modification that are getting that maintenance. So it is happening. It may not necessarily always, be aware that it's happening, but we're trying to do it strategically so we go after the biggest bang for the buck. And then on the inspections, I'm going to have Dennis jump in, but we do have clean, drain and dry cleaning machines around for non-motorized recreation. We have the Lake Keepers program for non-motorized watercraft, and we did 5,200 rover inspections with non-motorized last summer, which was the first time we deployed roving inspectors at the beaches. But Dennis, please elaborate.
Thank you, Julie. Dennis Baglow, Aquatic Invasive Species Program Manager for the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Julie hit those points very well. We have the Tahoe Keepers Program, which is a stewardship program to train and educate our non-motorized recreators to learn the impacts of invasive species that they may have and the potential crafts that they're employing or utilizing out on the lake and where those little critters can hide and how you can self-clean, drain, and dry. And to complement that, we have these new CD3 machines. I believe we have 4 of them now that are positioned in various places. We're getting one at Sand Harbor, there's one at Meeks Bay, and then there's 2 that can travel around. They're all on trailers, and we've gotten support from the league to purchase one of those, Lake Tahoe license plate grant to purchase another, along with infrastructure, and the Tahoe Keys Marina bought one as well. And so we work with all of the popular facilities that have staff at those popular non-motorized launching facilities like a Sand Harbor or a Baldwin Beach on the South Shore. And we go through a screening process. And if you are a Tahoe keeper, then that is a much more expedited process. But then any of those can be required to be sent to the inspections. They are subject to inspection, not mandatory like motorized. And then the rovers was a great new tool. As Julie mentioned, 5,200 engagements at the various beaches is a great new tool, and we're actually increasing that by hiring more this coming season. And I mentioned working with facilities, but to your previous point about compliance and, with the BMP example, ours is a little bit different. We're not issuing permits, but we do have regulations that require inspections and certain things. And so we do a secret shopper program where we're checking ourselves at the inspection stations, but also at the ramps to making sure they're following all the protocols we've established.
This is John Hester. I want to add one thing to the previous part about BMPs. A lot of you know, you all know, you passed regulations that allow coverage to not be the regulatory parameter, but stormwater systems, if they're stormwater systems. I wanted to connect some dots here. It wasn't really a question, but just so you know why we're doing that. The TMDL, total maximum daily load, which is done through MOUs through Division of Environmental Protection in Nevada and Lahontan Water Board and in California through NPDES permits, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, is like a 60-year program, and every year you have to reduce your pollution more and more. And all of the local governments know that it's going to get harder as we go. And so they are starting to use where it's going to be hard in some of the jurisdictions where there's a lot of slope and people are doing things parcel by parcel. That's where they're going to rely more and more on the individual parcels. But also what Shay is doing, and we have funded, is she set up a technical advisory committee of public works folks from all the local jurisdictions, and that we are working right now with an engineering consultant to design, to create specs for pieces of stormwater systems that the local jurisdictions will use, like a drop inlet or a retention basin or whatever it is. And our consultant is going around and getting ready to go around and talk to these folks and say, which pieces do you need specs for? So we're going to do the engineering work to help that happen. And that's something that Shay's doing that's not exactly giving you a BMP, but it's setting the stage so the local governments can put in these stormwater systems when it gets harder and harder to meet our TMDL requirements. We hope we'll have a leg up because we've done that. So that's connecting a few dots that aren't directly enforcement, but it's kind of the prevention side Julie was talking about.
Can I just add one thing? Julie mentioned, this shift from parcel by parcel to more area wide. And one of the things in the environmental analysis of that during the regional plan update was that area wide facilitates maintenance. It's very resource intensive and difficult to follow up with thousands and thousands and thousands of individual properties to make sure that they're all doing what they need to do to maintain their BMPs. But we do have staff that help with that. We have maintenance videos that people can watch online on how to do the work. But we really are pushing to make that shift because it's a lot easier for the local jurisdiction to go out and make sure something is maintained with their public works staff that treats, runoff from private properties and the right of way collectively than individual parcels. There will always be some BMPs on each parcel. Some BMPs like erosion control that stabilize sediment sources, once they're in place, often don't need a lot of maintenance. But for the infiltration BMPs, especially those that are taking water from parking lots and driveways that have a lot of traction material in them, those require a lot of maintenance to function. And so regional or area-wide treatment is really looking at better ways of managing that so that they can withstand the test of time.
Thank you. Ms. Gustafson.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the questions and comments from my colleagues because my big point was to say thank you. You have the toughest job at the agency. Probably no constituent out there says, hey, code compliance is here. Let's have a party, right? And I know that firsthand from the folks that used to work for me and had to enforce all the great ideas we had at board and management, but it's your boots on the ground that are facing these people in the field. Yet the work is critical. I mean, it is the most important that puts into action the measures that we need to do to protect the lake. So I just wanted to thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can thank the board for those comments. It means a lot, Julie Reagan, and it can get difficult. And I do want to acknowledge the staff and certainly Dennis Shea and Steve and Graham and Jack. But we also have, we have Karen, we have a whole team of people here and out in the field doing that very work right now. And I just want to underscore, like, just, I had a cousin with a career in the FBI and said, it's the things that don't happen that you don't have any idea. And you would keep you up at night if you knew the work that was going on to keep people safe in this country. And, like, it's very much like that. Like, you don't always see the work that's happening, and it can be confrontational. So we have to train our staff of how to de-escalate situations, whether it's with a construction site or a homeowner, but we have the best in the basin, and I'm so proud of this team. And when the public is interested in this, and maybe they just don't have the full picture, I really want them to think of the people who are boots on the ground at TRPA, but also at other agencies throughout the basin, because we love this place, and we know and understand that a rule on paper is only a rule on paper. You have to be able to comply, get people into compliance and enforce those rules. We take it seriously, and I appreciate the amount of time that we've been able to spend on this because it is very important, and we have had a lot of conversation around it. And we have to thank our partners like the League to Save Lake Tahoe, like the research institutions through citizen science. People are reporting issues on their phones that gets transferred into our compliance teams to take, additional measures. So it really has fanned out beyond just the people that work at our agency into the broader community, and it will take all of us to do that work to make sure that we are protecting the lake and adhering to our mission.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Anyone online from the board? Seeing none. All right, thank you so much for the presentation and the thoughtful discussion this morning. We can move on then to agenda item 10, which is reports. Director Reagan, anything else to report this morning, post afternoon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, just that we're very close to lunch, so that's the first item. And the lunch will be out these double doors to the right. There's full lunch for the board. We are going to take a lunch break, and then we will have the local government committee that will be adjourning, or will adjourn the main meeting and after reports, and then we'll start the local government committee with Chair Hill. I just have a couple quick announcements to make, things that I wanted you to know that we might not have time to get into tomorrow at the strategic planning session, but we're all very excited to be at the Thunderbird Lodge for that. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Just a couple quick announcements. First, before we get into the federal and state legislative updates, I just wanted to, for those of you that didn't know, let you know that today is National Administrative Professionals Day. And it's a big day, and I just wanted us to take a minute to thank the table in front of us, Maria Ambler, Catherine Houston, and Jessica Gillis. Thank you for your support. We also have back at the office Kayla Horowitz, Judy Failer, and Madeline Halewin, who is our newest member of the admin team, who is at the front desk. And we it fans out beyond that with our meeting support. Today, we have our IT support. We have Jeremy, our new facilities director. Taking a meeting off campus is a big deal. It's a lot of work. Yesterday, none of the technology worked. And this morning it was perfect because they came up and were putting in their sweat equity to make this meeting happen. And then this site tomorrow at Thunderbird is also equally logistically challenging. And it takes a team to do it. But the admin professionals at TRPA, again, do that work behind the scenes that you might not ever see, but we're very grateful and we're very proud of the work that you do. And thank you for all. And we will be going to lunch on Friday. So save your appetite for that. So thank you all for all of your great work. We appreciate it. Transitioning into a couple of quick updates. The first update of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, because this board has had many discussions and conversations around LTRA, we call it for short, funding, I wanted to give you the good news that we heard from the U.S. Forest Service just this week, Monday, that we got our full funding by and large for the Restoration Act for fiscal 25, which the Congress just did their continuing resolution to keep the government open back in March. We were very worried that that money would not necessarily materialize. We've confirmed with the Forest Service that we have full funding for forest fuels and watershed restoration. We are probably not going to hear from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service until May, when they have a new permanent director that's confirmed for the agency on the invasive species. But we're hopeful that we'll also have full funding. We're waiting to hear on the water infrastructure piece for fire suppression. That pot of money goes to the Regional Forest Service office, so we don't yet know what that number is, but we're confident that we're going to be whole. So great news in light of a lot of concern of uncertainty with federal funding. I wanted to let you know that and then give you a couple of updates related to California and Nevada. This picture on the slide was from Sierra Day in the Capitol and Team Tahoe. Many partners from Tahoe participated with the greater Sierra area in a day in the Capitol in Sacramento. The Conservancy is on deck to get $23.5 million for wildfire and forest health through appropriations. TRPA's budget is looking whole in California, so good news on that front. In Nevada, it's been a really busy Nevada session. I know some of you have been very involved and many of you have supported TRPA, and we appreciate it from the Nevada delegation. There were 8 bills that came out of the Nevada Oversight Committee for TRPA. Not all of those directly tied to TRPA necessarily, so I wanted to clarify that. There's one bill in particular that would be enabling legislation to form business improvement districts on the state of Nevada. And if Washoe County or Douglas County decided that was a good idea, any funds that would be generated would be more for things like transit or beautification and would not come to TRPA. So there's been some question in the community of where would that money go? And it really is about the community in terms of adding more opportunities to fund transit in particular. And then the biennium budget is advancing. The terminology is our budget was closed. And that doesn't mean it's a done deal because the legislature goes for another 6 weeks or so in Nevada, but things were are looking good, but there's still, a good bit of uncertainty about funding in general for the two states. So just wanted to give you a couple highlights. And then just a couple more things before I turn it over to the legal report. Some of you have contacted us seeing the publicity around Homewood selling their season passes. And I just wanted to share with you, since it was a very controversial year of working through the Homewood master plan process, that we've had a lot of great feedback from the community, from the group Keep Homewood Public, saying thank you. This shows a commitment that the ski mountain will open and that this board made that happen in the actions that you took, and that was very thoughtful and very deliberative. And we've had some really good feedback that the community is pleased to see a commitment to keep that ski mountain open to the public next year. So I wanted to mention that. And then I think we just have a quick update on the Forest Health and Wildfire Forum that the Tahoe Chamber, the two chambers on the South Shore sponsored, and our team attended along with Member Lane and officials from the city and from other areas around the South Shore. And this picture is of the city fire chief, Chief Drennan, speaking with a panel, Chief Scott Lindgren, who you've heard from Tahoe Douglas. We had Chief Newman from CAL FIRE, Eric Walker from the Forest Service, and then Chief Stephen from Lake Valley Fire, who you just appointed to our Advisory Planning Commission. And then the smiling group on the right with Jeff Cowan, with our partners, talking about home hardening and defensible space. And yet another way to get the word out is just going to out to the community for forums like this. And there were a lot of good questions about evacuation. And so what we're going to do is send you the link to that recording and then package up a couple key questions and answers with those boots on the ground. These are the fire service professionals that work directly in incidents, and hearing directly from them was super helpful. And then next week, the Moore Foundation is convening in Tahoe, and several of our staff are participating in panel discussions. I'll be doing a welcome next Wednesday, and that is scaling up across the West, getting more resilience in the West related to fire. And so really good brain power coming. People from all over the country are convening in Tahoe to hear about what we're doing, as a leader in this space. And so it's a good opportunity to also learn from others. And then the last slide, I believe, is just like the EIP projects. Wanted to put a fine point on what the EIP committee heard last month. This is one of the biggest seasons we've had in the 30-year history of the EIP, Environmental Improvement Program, with 40 projects and $250 million. That's all sources, federal, state, local, private, and there's private funds. Let's not forget about philanthropy, the Tahoe Fund, the League to Save Lake Tahoe, and others. The pilot program for 89 corridor that Member Lane has been so very diligently working on. But it also means there's going to be a lot of construction. So be mindful of that we will have to get through the construction, but there are some really great projects that are coming down the line. And these don't happen overnight. These have been planned for years. And so a lot of investment that's coming in to help the lake and to help our communities. And then the next what's coming up slide, we're bringing you a briefing in May on forest health. It's Wildfire Awareness Month. We're also bringing some officials that do emergency planning. We've gotten the Nevada side, Douglas County Sheriff Dan Coverly to agree to come and talk about from a law enforcement perspective around evacuation. So that should be of interest. We've got a recommendations report coming from the evaluation report for thresholds. Our budget and work plan is in June. We've got a mobility hub, Spooner Summit corridor update. That one's just for you, Secretary Aguilar. Wear your t-shirt, please. The SR28 t-shirts that we have will be on full display. We're going to talk more about that. And we'd like to do a field trip in June. And so we're still putting that together. But one of the spots we definitely want to see is Sugar Pine Village, affordable housing. I think there's close to 70 units that have been occupied in that project. And we're trying to come up with some other ideas for a field tour. So put that on your calendar. And that is the end of my report. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next up, Graham, anything to report out of legal?
Just very short. I think just to mention, if we all heard the Barton Health project, we made a decision to move that to an environmental impact statement. So it's going to be a little bit longer of a process, but we think that was what was legally required here. And so we feel good about that. And we've been working with Douglas County there. And then the next thing is no other report besides that, just a very general invitation that any of you are welcome to contact me if you ever have legal questions related to TRPA. So I always put that invitation out there. That's it.
Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 11, which is governing member reports. Any members of the board have anything they want to report? Ms. Hill?
Thank you very much. We are starting the Washoe Tahoe Leadership Academy starting next week on Wednesday, and TRPA is a partner with us on that project. And I just want to say thank you to the staff, and really looking forward to educating new community members to Incline Village and Crystal Bay about how all of our governments work and how they can work with us. So thank you for your partnership.
Ms. Gustafson?
Two items I wanted to report on. One is we will be hosting, my office will be hosting a fire town hall on the North Shore, similar to what it sounds like South Shore did, with our fire and our sheriff, public safety officials to talk about both wildfire preparedness and evacuation. This is the fourth year we've done this town hall, and I just want to continue to make sure the public's aware we do that. That's June 17th at 5:30 p.m. at the Event Center in Kings Beach. And then secondly, when the board was unable to meet up here in March because of a little bit of a snowstorm, but we did continue to have our Tahoe items heard down in Auburn. And we did agree to continue the next phases of the Highway 89 and 267 transit lane discussion. We gave direction on that project to do 2 transit lanes on either side of those corridors and to proceed to the next phases of design to hopefully secure funding and move those projects forward. They're mammoth undertakings, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars to do it. But it will help both in evacuation capacity as well as dedicated transit lanes to expedite transit ahead of the traffic blockages we often occur. So we're excited to move those 2 projects forward.
All right, thank you. And seeing no other governing board members, let's move on then to agenda item 12, which is committee reports. Any committee have reports? All right, that brings us to our final agenda item, which is closing public comment. And any member of the public wishing to address the governing board on any item listed or not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. And we'll start with in-room comment. Anyone wishing to make closing public comment? All right, seeing none. Do we have hands raised online?
Madam Chair, we have no hands raised online to comment.
All right, with that, we will go into recess. I need a motion to go into recess.
I'll move that we go into recess.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.